Have you ever wondered what it was like for a woman to work as a guard in a Nazi concentration camp? On April 15, 1945, the British 11th Armored Division liberated Bergen-Belsen, one of the most brutal Nazi concentration camps, and they apprehended Nazi war criminals, including Elisabeth Volkenrath, one of the most sadistic guards at Bergen-Belsen. In this video, we'll delve into the horrifying execution of Nazi guard Elisabeth Volkenrath, who participated in numerous heinous acts of cruelty during the Holocaust, and examine the atrocities committed by the Nazi regime. Get ready to be shocked and learn about a dark chapter in human history. On April 15, 1945, the British 11th Armored Division liberated Bergen-Belsen, one of the most brutal Nazi concentration camps. This concentration camp epitomized into the true horrors and bestiality of the Nazi regime and its death camps. When the British forces arrived, they found a sight of unspeakable horror: 13,000 unburied dead bodies, along with almost 60,000 sick and starved prisoners. In the months following the camp's liberation, thousands more inmates succumbed to diseases such as typhus and tuberculosis. As the British forces began the daunting task of cleaning up the camp and burying the dead, they apprehended male and female Nazi guards responsible for these atrocities. Among them was Elisabeth Volkenrath, one of the most sadistic guards at Bergen-Belsen. Born on September 5, 1919, Volkenrath had a humble background and was a poor student in her early years. Before the war, she worked in a hairdressing salon. Volkenrath's infamous career in concentration camps began in 1941 when she became a guard at Ravensbrück concentration camp. Her role was to supervise the women who came from outside the camp and prevent them from escaping. She was trained to maintain order through physical violence, frequently beating and mistreating prisoners until they were petrified with fear. Despite her appalling actions, Volkenrath was apprehended and forced by the British forces to help bury the dead bodies in mass graves. This was just a small part of the punishment she and other Nazi war criminals would face for their crimes against humanity. The horrors of Bergen-Belsen will forever serve as a reminder of the atrocities committed by the Nazi regime and the importance of striving for a world free of such inhumanity. In March of 1942, Elisabeth Volkenrath was sent to Auschwitz, a concentration camp in Poland. According to her testimony, she began her time there working in a tailoring shop, where elderly women prisoners mended the uniforms of their fellow inmates. During this time, Volkenrath regularly hit the prisoners with her fists. Later, she supervised a group of 25 prisoners in the parcel store, in charge of opening and distributing parcels that came from the Red Cross or prisoners' relatives. As time went on, Volkenrath became known for her exceptional brutality, making her one of the most hated women in the camp. She rose to the position of head warden and was in charge of all the SS women. One of her duties was making selections from the prisoners returning from outside work, choosing victims for the gas chambers. She seemed to take particular pleasure in this task, and on one occasion, out of 1,400 prisoners, only 300 survived her selection. Volkenrath's other favorite activity was beating women and prisoners. On one occasion, she ordered a female prisoner to undress and beat her so severely that the victim spent 3 weeks in the hospital. One inmate testified that Volkenrath beat prisoners on 80 separate occasions, often using a rubber truncheon until they were unconscious or dead. On one occasion, when a female prisoner was accused of wearing a stolen ring and locket, Volkenrath and her colleagues stripped the woman naked and beat her with a rubber truncheon. Then they locked the victim in a cellar with food and water for only 3 days, during which she endured brutal interrogations. The woman managed to survive thanks to her sister, who smuggled her food and water, but after being sent to clean latrines, she contracted typhus and died. In yet another example of her cruelty, Volkenrath threw an old woman down the stairs when she came to ask for work. The woman died immediately. She even took away food and water from starving prisoners, claiming they had too much of it. During roll calls, Volkenrath made prisoners hold their hands above their heads, adding to their physical exhaustion. Elisabeth Volkenrath's reign of terror in Auschwitz was characterized by sadism and brutality, and she has been remembered as one of the most notorious figures of the Holocaust. Elisabeth Volkenrath was a notorious Nazi female camp guard who participated in numerous heinous acts of cruelty during the Holocaust. One such incident was when Bullhalter, another Nazi female camp guard, was punished with 25 lashes with a whip for sending letters written by prisoners to their relatives in an unofficial way and having a love affair with a male prisoner. This punishment was ordered by Heinrich Himmler himself, the head of the SS. The punishment was administered by other female guards, including Volkenrath. As the end of the war approached, Volkenrath was transferred from Auschwitz to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp in January 1945, where she arrived on February 5th. There, she and Joseph Kramer, the camp's commandant, brutally assaulted a female inmate who attempted to escape. They hit her repeatedly with a stick all over her body, causing severe injuries. Volkenrath's cruelty did not end there. She once caught a sick girl taking vegetables and made her kneel and hold the vegetables above her head for hours. When the girl could no longer hold her arms up, Volkenrath beat her mercilessly with a rubber truncheon on her head, back, and legs, rendering her unconscious. No one was allowed to assist the girl, so she just laid there until the evening, suffering from her injuries. These disturbing accounts paint a vivid picture of the inhumane treatment of prisoners in Nazi concentration camps and highlight the depravity of people like Elisabeth Volkenrath, who took pleasure in inflicting pain and suffering on others. Throughout her entire time in the concentration camp, Elisabeth Volkenrath derived pleasure from inflicting abuse on the prisoners. Even in her last moments there, she continued her ruthless behavior. One day, as the British forces arrived to liberate the camp, witnesses saw her ferociously beating a helpless prisoner with her bare fists. The violence was so severe that the victim collapsed and did not move again. After the liberation of Bergen-Belsen, Elisabeth Volkenrath was captured by the British forces, along with her Nazi colleagues such as Johanna Bormann and Joseph Kramer. Bormann was notorious for setting dogs on the prisoners, while Kramer served as the last commandant of the concentration camp. Volkenrath was put on trial at the Belsen trial, which began on September 17, 1945. Despite being faced with numerous charges, she adamantly refused to confess to any of them. She claimed to have only slapped a few prisoners with her hands and never with a rubber truncheon. However, her lies could not save her from the consequences of her actions. Ultimately, the British military tribunal found Elisabeth Volkenrath guilty and sentenced her to death by hanging. She was only 26 years old when the sentence was carried out by the British executioner Albert Pierrepoint on December 13, 1945. Her brutal and merciless behavior had brought her to the end of her life, but the victims and survivors of her atrocities would carry the scars for the rest of theirs. As we reflect on the horrors of the Nazi regime and the brutal acts committed by people like Elisabeth Volkenrath, it's important to remember that we must never forget the lessons of history. As we wrap up, we hope that this video has shed light on the disturbing legacy of Elisabeth Volkenrath and serves as a powerful reminder the need to fight for human rights and dignity. Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button below for more content like this. See you in the next one.